platform dependency and independency, where we have learned about the compilations, right? Okay, right, the compilation process. So it's similar way. It's very important to understand what is the compilation process in .NET. Now, first, what is compilation? What do we actually mean by compiling a program? Right. So to actually start with as a layman, right? So normally we write code, right, in plain simple English, right? But that code is not understandable by machine, right? Normally, because machine can understand byte buffer or byte code, right? Which means whatever code we write in plain English and using some formats, if machine should understand those instructions, right, then there is a need that we have to convert them into bytes, right? Or normally called native code which a machine can understand. Now, this process of conversion is called as a compilation process or compile process, right? And this is done by something called compilers, right? In any language, this will be a common standard, right? So this will be common. Now, even if you have experience on C or C++, right, you would have done the same, right? After writing your program, right, you would have executed, which internally will compile and run your program, right? Same way, it's very important to understand every technology's execution model. Anyways, so the main intention here of our training is to learn coding. Anyways, right? How to code in .NET and understanding what exactly are different things, different features which we have in .NET, right? But before that, it's very important to understand how .NET code is internally compiled and converted to a native code or a machine understandable code, right? And then we can actually go to the actual coding part, right? Now, here let us see how we have an execution model. Now, execution model, whenever we say, right, it's very important to, there is a word called CLR. Now, CLR is nothing but your common language runtime. Now, this is the heart of .NET, right? So, any program, if any program have to be executed or compiled or started up, or you want to work or you want to run an application, right? And CLR is very important. If anything happens to CLR, if it gets corrupted or anything, right, then your program will not run. Now let's see the high level execution model, how it works. Then we'll actually go into deeper of CLR, right? Now, so when it comes to execution model, first thing what we should have a code, right? Code written in plain English. Anyways, we write a code in English, but we have many languages to write a code. Now .NET supports many language templates to write a code. Now we have C#, you can write a code in C#, you can write in VB, you can write in C++, right? You can write your code in VC++, right? There are many. Now all these different codes, why Microsoft have enabled these many languages support to .NET is, now let's say you have an experience in C++ and you know the complete syntax of C++, right? Then you don't have to worry much because you don't have to learn the syntax because you're already familiar with the syntax of C++. So come over to .NET and you can write the same syntax program using your .NET editor. Now internally it will be using .NET, but you will be actually writing your syntax of the program in C++. So in order to give that flexibility, we have or .NET have provided many compatible languages. So as such, Visual Studio can support 61 different set of languages here, right? Now among 61, right, 9 are actually are designed by Microsoft, which are proprietary. So those 9 languages are C#, which we have already seen, C Sharp, VB, you have VC++, and you have something called J Sharp, you have F Sharp, right? You have VB, C++, no, which is the same anyways. It's only C++ anyways. And you can write C++, right? And we have JavaScript, which is JS.NET or JS, right? And then you have your PowerShell. You can write a program in PowerShell, right? Normally it is not PowerShell, it is Windows PowerShell. And then you have Ruby. Normally you call it as IronRuby, right? Or you have Python, right? Or normally you can also call it as IronPython. So these are the 9 languages. I think these are 9, right? 3, we have 3 and 3. These are the 9 languages which are directly, you can actually, if you have Visual Studio, you can actually start writing them. These languages. And other languages, yes, it actually supports, but you have to install the plugins of other languages. But they are much available and approved languages in .NET, right? Now the main reason is that in order to provide language interoperability, right, like we can write code on .NET on any language, right? And most preferred language is C Sharp, right, which is mostly prevailing in market. Fine. So now here, so this is a code. Now you have written a code here. Now we'll see anyways, our complete training is to see how to write a code. So we will be using C Sharp to write, to actually drive our complete training anyways. Now, the next step is, immediate step will be, I have my code ready, then what I have to do, I have to run this. I mean, what exactly is a code? You are writing some instructions which your computer should follow and do some tasks. That is your program, right? Like you are writing a program to switch on your light, right? So when you trigger on, the program will be executed and it will actually give command to your hardware, and your hardware should act accordingly and give output. That is nothing but a code. Now here we are saying you can write code in any language you want, right? Now, so once, if a code here, if it has to understand a machine language, which is, let's say this is my operating system, right? Now it is my operating system, which this code should actually trigger my operating system, because operating system is a hardware level program. Now if I can successfully give my instructions to operating system, that is more than enough, because operating system in turn will talk to your hardware, right? And then it will give you output anyways. Now obviously after operating systems interaction, we need an operating system because our .NET is an application program. Then you will get an output. Now in between there are many things which will run. Now firstly, let's say you have a code, but normally what we did, we have a code compiled and that's it, and we have a bytecode which is loaded onto operating system and it will give you an output. That's it. That's a simple pattern which you have done. But here you have 2 different levels of compilation, right? Why? Because you can see that it is providing multiple languages firstly, which means even if .NET provides multiple language, right, it should actually convert these multiple format of languages to its own native language first. Am I right? Unless it converts to its own native language, the compilation process to OS loading will be difficult. Now that's the reason why for each language .NET have got different compilers. For C Sharp you have C Sharp compiler, for VB you have VB compiler, right? These are different compilers being provided by .NET framework. CPP you have CPP compiler, right? You have same JS compiler now. Now these different compilers, what they do, whenever you build a program, building is nothing but compiling a program. 2 different level of compilations run. First level, your native language will be compiled using your corresponding compiler, and it will be converted to an intermediate language, IL, which is called as a intermediate language. Understand this, guys? Right? Why intermediate language? So this IL is the one which is the actual language understandable by your .NET actually. Right? So intermediate language we normally also call this as a managed code. It can be managed code or intermediate language, or we also call assembly intermediate language, IL code. We normally call IL or assembly IL, or sometimes, most of the times you will hear something called MSIL, which is Microsoft Intermediate Language. Right? Your MSIL program. This is intermediate language. Now, once intermediate language is ready, now with this intermediate language, now you can understand any number of languages can be easily be interoperable. That's the reason why we have language interoperability, a feature in .NET, because we have a very good feature called MSL, where each and every compiler, each and every compiler of each language knows how to convert that particular language to IL. That's the reason why we have a powerful MSL. Now this is something which we can actually call it as a partial compilation. Right? Obviously, yes, it is a partial compilation because we have actually compiled it to an intermediate language, which means from one language we have compiled to other language. That's it. But now it comes the main compilation, which gets compiled to your native code or machine understandable code. Now that is done by something called your JIT, which is JIT compiler, or normally called as just-in-time compiler. Just in time. As soon as you get the MSIL code ready, your JIT compiler will compile your complete intermediate language, and it will actually load on something called CLR. So this is where you get your CLR. Now your JIT compiler is a part of CLR. CLR is a big box, and in that big box you have one simple component called JIT, which is just in time. And just in time compiles your intermediate language, and then it is converted to your native code. Now native code is nothing but a native code understandable by a machine, or normally we also can call it as a machine code. Anything is fine. Right? Now this is how we converted our code written into a bytecode which is understandable by the machine. Now this native code we normally load it on operating system. Now here it continues. It loads, we load it in operating system, and then we have an output. Now this is a complete execution model of your .NET program. Right? Main things, you have written code, partial compilation, which is each language have got its own compiler, converted to intermediate language or MSIL, and then MSIL, as soon as MSIL code generated, right, gets generated, immediately your just-in compiler will compile this program and will load it on CLR. Now, what is CLR and all we'll see right away, because this is something which is very important, right? You have many formats which got converted to some language, but even then there are so many things which has to be consumed and converted and then compiled to a native code, which is a machine code, right? What are different things we'll see in CLR. Now this is a normal compilation which you normally get in .NET, and then you get an output of your instructions, whatever you have written in. Right? So this is a complete compilation or execution process we have in .NET. This is same across different versions. Any number of versions comes up, doesn't matter at all. Your execution model will never change. Right? Now let's see this component, what exactly CLR contains, which actually converts all our code to IL then to native code, because this is a main component which converts or compiles our code to a native code. Let's see what is CLR. Now this CLR is nothing but your main .NET framework. Whatever we call .NET framework and all, right? The main component which we call a framework is nothing but your CLR. Why? Because CLR is a combination, normally .NET framework is a combination of two things, which is CLR is a main component and your BCL, right? Now, which means whenever you are talking about .NET framework, which means you should talk about two main things, which are, there are only two main components in .NET framework, which is CLR and BCL. CLR is nothing but your common language runtime, we are going to see it right away. And you have something called BCL. This is nothing but your base class library. We will see this base class library. This is something where to actually quote it in a layman language, base class library is nothing but libraries or code which Microsoft have already done, and they gave that code to us so that we can use that and do some you can use that as a supportive code, and we can develop some other applications. That is nothing but a BCL, which is a base class library. We'll see base class library once we understand CLR. Now let's get into CLR first. So we'll take important layers in CLR and we'll see that. Now under CLR you have four main layers, which is you have your CLS, you have your CTS, you have your JIT, which is a compiler, just-in-time compiler, which you have seen, and then we have something called GC, which is your garbage collector. Now these are the main layers which we have in our CLR. Now let's see one by one. What is CLS? CLS is nothing but Common Language Specification. Now this is your Common Language Specification. Now with the name itself you can understand Common Language Specification, which means this is a main layer, right, which actually creates language interoperability. Right? You have some 61 languages which we have seen. Now all those languages, right, will have different formats. Right? They will have, in VB you will not have a method braces and all. In C# you'll have to use a flower braces to start and close the program. Right? In JS, JavaScript will have internal JS scripts which you can write. And there are different formats which you have. Now, what makes your CLR makes it easy to understand those formats is nothing but your CLS. Your Common Language Specification is the one where it have got all the intelligence to understand different formats of your different languages. That is your CLS. Now CLS is the one which actually maintains your managed code. Managed code is something, now whatever you run on CLR or on .NET is nothing but your managed code, right? And whatever you run out of your .NET framework, which means we will be using some libraries, let's say some third-party libraries are available in market, and we are taking that library and we are using, which is not written in .NET also, right? Which are already compiled ones, right? We will be using that. Anyways, we'll see one unmanaged code example also, right? Where we are using that, which means that code will not be loaded on .NET framework. Now that type of code is called as your unmanaged code, right? Unmanaged code, which will be redirected directly to your OS operating system. Whereas this managed code will be actually redirected to CLR first and then to operating system. This is the difference. It's very important. This is the difference between your unmanaged code and a managed code. Okay? So this is something which is mostly taken care by your CLS, which is Common Language. So it is something which takes the coding syntax, whether it is correct or not. If there is any issues, it will actually give you, complete modules of different exception handlings. Right? We'll see each and every part in CLS where you have many exception handlings, or creating multiple execution processes, and everything we have in CLS, the main one. And then we have something called CTS. Now CTS is your common type system. What is type? Now type is nothing but a data type. If you already know programming language, right? You have, let's say, int or integer, right? Integer is a simple data type, right? Which can hold int data or integer data or a real, not real, integral part of your real data, real number, right? Now this data type, I can actually, in different languages, right? There are different declaration types. In C#, you define integer as, let's say, int, right? In VB, let's say you are actually making as integer, right? And let's say in some other language you are giving int32. That all these, are same, are actually pointing to the same data type called integer. How does CLR know that whether you have actually defined int of 32-bit or int of 16-bit? Don't worry about 32 and 16-bit. We'll come to what exactly 32 and 16 bits when we come to data types. I'll explain the memory specification also, right? But I can have int 32, or let's say I'm defining in 16, which is of 2 bytes, 16 bits. So how does my CTS know? Because it knows, because for all languages, right, data type mapping is already done in CTS. It already have each and every information on. If you are using C# and if you define int, which means you are actually using int 32. And int 32 is a main data type which is mapped in your CTS, which means this is a 32-bit or 2 bytes, or sorry, 4 bytes data type. Same way in VB, right? If you define integer, right, which means again you are defining an integer type which should be of 4 bytes, and again internally it will map again this to int 32. That's what happens. Which means based on the data type you have defined, your CTS knows which one to map internally, right? Because it has to convert everything to understandable format, and then it has to generate a managed code, right? So that is why the CTS is important, right? Because every language will have its own data type declaration type, right? So that is something, and CTS handles all data types, right? And we'll see what are the different data types we have, and mappings and memory systems, whatever we have. Now that is something which is your CTS. And the next one is JIT. We have just seen this. This is a main compiler, which we normally call it as a .NET main compiler, which actually converts your MSIL to and loads it onto your CLR. That is your JIT compiler, which is just-in-time compiler. And now what is GC? GC is your garbage collector. Right? GC is nothing but your garbage collector. Now, how does garbage collector works? Now, if we go back to our C++ or previous legacy languages, right? Now, whenever you define any object, let's say I have a class and I have defined an object, simple object, anything, right? Let's say obj is my object, or you define int I as a variable, right? Now, unless you nullify them or release them from memory, or you can take even the pointer. Let's say I have a pointer, right? Now, unless you disconnect the pointer with the memory, right, or clear this object or dispose this object, that memory will stay as it is in your heap memory. It will never be cleared. That is a main problem which we have. Memory management was a main problem which we had in C++. Now that is completely resolved here using our garbage collector. We'll see how it actually works. Now garbage collector have got a pattern how it works. Now it have got a pattern called tree generation pattern. It's a standard pattern which we have. Now we call it as a first generation, right? This as a second generation and a third generation. Now, whenever you define any object, right, or any variable or anything, it will first. Now this is something which is a heap memory. Yes. Stack and heap memories. Stack memory is something which is your memory will stay until your program is disposed, your application is disposed, which is like a permanent memory. And your heap is something which is a floating memory or a temporary memory, which is used to work with your data types and all. Fine, which is a temporary memory as such. Now all the garbage collector mainly triggers your heap memory. Now in your heap memory, these are the generations which will be created. Whenever you create any variable or object, right, what it will do? Obviously, if you create any variable or anything, it should assign some memory to it, right? It's obvious. Now, I'm actually working on this. I'm actually moving this pointer, right? I'm actually moving this pointer. How it is working? My processor is allocating some memory to my mouse where it actually points to wherever I want, right? Now here, let's say whenever you create an object, right? Let's say you created something called A object and B object. Now that will be allocated here in your first generation because it has got some memory. Now let's say it continued to create objects like C, D, E, F, and different objects. Now when it comes to a level, right, obviously it will get filled up and it may need some workaround to actually clear this, right? Now that is something which comes to an overhead. Now here what happens is your garbage collector comes into picture. Now garbage collector will be always running in the background. What it does is it will come to your first generation. Now what it will do, and after this fills up, right, it will not clear any of this memory. Rather, if more objects are coming, it will move to the second generation. Now let's say here it is creating some more objects. Or one object. So meanwhile, whenever it is allocating objects to the next generation, right? Meanwhile, garbage collector will start running, and it will go to generation 1 which got filled up, and it will actually investigate each and every object. And whatsoever object is dereferenced or is not in use, right? So all those objects will be disposed. Everything will be disposed, and it will actually make some clearance. Now. And again, as your second generation is filling up, right? Now, once your second generation is completely filled, then your next variables will be allocated to the third generation. Let's say you want to take some numbers, right? Now, what happens? Your garbage collector will come to second generation block, and it will do again whatever dereference objects are there. It will start clearing up. Now, it will keep some space here. Now if your third generation fills up, then again what it will do? Your framework will start allocating those variables again from first generation, and garbage collector will start working on third generation and it will clear. Which means it will clear this one. Again, it will go back to your first generation when it fills. Now it is a round robin again. Right? Now let's say whenever you get something called out of memory or any exception, right? This is what happens. Every generation will fill up and every object is stuck, right? And they are not dereferenced, which means dereferenced or referenced object will never be cleaned up using your garbage collector. Which means if 3 generation gets filled up, right? That's a point when you get a memory out of exception. Right? Anyways, but your third generation is always your heavier one, some 10 MB I hope, where you can actually save huge data, huge variables in this. But even if it gets filled up, then there is a problem there. Now this is how the garbage collector works across in our document, right? So this is something. These are the layers. Now you can see these are the different layers where your CLR works, right, where you have complete, scope of, writing any code on any language and get it work. Right? Irrespective of anything, your garbage collector will work on your libraries. Right? So that is your Scala. Now, what is BCL? Now, as I said, BCL is your base class library. Now, in .NET, right, there are so many class libraries being provided, right, which we can use to do some program, to develop some applications. Now, the hierarchy of libraries are something like this. You have a class library, which normally we also call it as a DLLs, right? You would have seen in your Windows, right? If you go to program files and or Windows program, right, you will see system32 DLLs, right? Your kernel DLLs, right? Your managed DLLs, there are or management control DLLs. There are so many DLLs which we have. Now those are nothing but your class libraries. Yeah. Even if you install your operating system into your machine, right? There are so many DLLs or libraries which will get registered with the registry and will get installed into your root folder, which is operating system installed folder. Same way, here you have your BCL, where you have a class library, which is a main DLL which you have. This class library internally, obviously, right, you have many class libraries, but you should know how to use them. Right, you have a class, 10 different class libraries, and if you don't know how to use them, then there is no use of it, right? It's very important to know. Now, in order to know the use, it's very important to know what are the internal things you have in class library, right? That's very important. So, in order to make life easy, right, your class libraries, are actually follow. Normally, libraries will follow some hierarchy like this. Internal to your class library, you have something called namespace. Now, this namespace is like folders. Now, let's say your class library is a drive. Let's say it's a D drive, and your namespace is like different folders. You have my projects, like you have something called office. You have something called personal, right? You have different folders in your D drive, let's say, right? Now, those things are nothing but your namespaces, right? And then internal to namespace, we have something called main classes. Now, this is a class where your inbuilt, whatever Microsoft provides, right, different code is being provided in these classes, which are segregated under ranges. Obviously, let's say you have 3 different namespaces, like you have multi-threading, you have files, right, or you have collections. Let's say these 3 are 3 different features which we have. Now, these 3 are provided in different namespaces. And in each namespace you have different classes, right? And in each class you have something called predefined functions, or predefined functions. Obviously, you can actually get some functionality or statements or code, right, or instructions in the form of functions. Unless you have functions or methods, we call it sometimes as methods, right? Or sometimes we call it as behaviors. Right? Unless you have a function written in class, you don't have any logic there. You can write logic only in a function or a method, but you can't write without a method or a function. You won't be able to write any logic. Right? Which means you have a function. Now, in the function you have a logic, or you have your main. Right? So these are the hierarchies which we have: class libraries, namespaces, classes, predefined functions, right? And each function will have, and these can be many. In a class, you can have multiple class libraries. In one class library, you can have multiple namespaces. In one namespace, you can have multiple classes. In one class, you can have multiple functions. In one function, you have multiple statements of code. Right? That's how it works. And even we follow the same, right? And whenever we are defining our own classes, so in BCL you have 2 things again in class libraries. One is BCL, which is base class library, and one more thing is UCL, which is user defined classes. User defined class labels. UCL is nothing but the one which we are going to create. We will create a class, right? We will create a class and then say, no, this is my class. So that is something which is user defined. I am creating my own class, and I follow something like namespace class, right? I'll show you these things. Namespace, and then we will create a class, and then we will create some function where you are going to create a code, right? And then I can actually make them as a library, and I can actually sell them, right? So mainly your BCL and UCL are basically a reusable codes. So these are mainly, we normally write common classes only for reusability. Now, in order to, avoid redundancy of code, right? Same code if you're writing in 10 different classes is not a good programming style, right? So always you have to write a centric based code where different components of application will be accessing one particular piece of code which can be common across. Right? Now this PCL actually comes with your .NET framework. That's what we said, right? Your .NET framework's main component is PCL. Now whenever you install a .NET framework, all your PCLs will be installed in your assemblies. So mainly all your DLLs will go into your Windows assemblies. Right? Windows assemblies. Now, as we have different hierarchies, right? Now this will actually clear out ambiguity. Actually, let's say you have two different classes, right, with the same method name. I mean, just take an example of let's say you have sample class, and in sample class you have, let's say, print method, and we have one more sample class or sample 2 where you have same method again, right? I have two different same name for two different methods, but what is making me making me to avoid ambiguity here? Because my class name is different. Now let's say if your class name is same, right? Now how can I remove this ambiguity? I may have the namespace different. Let's say namespace 1 and namespace 2, right? Which is namespace 2. Now this is how the ambiguity will be differentiated. Whenever I go to print, I know which class it is and I know which namespace it is, right? Functionality will be different, or maybe names are same. But so using this hierarchy, right? This is a proposed recommended hierarchy which you can follow, even writing your code or writing your own assemblies, right? Which will definitely avoid your ambiguity situation in your code, right? So this is what we have in .NET framework and how it actually works internally, right? So basically, whenever you normally start your coding and all, right? So it's very important to keep in mind whenever you are writing some logic and all, not in training and all. You can write any number of variables and everything, but there is something called performance, or the way you are writing a program will define how good is your program or how optimized program you are writing. So in those cases, yes, you may have few options to remember this. Okay, how this is working and how GC is working. If I have to help out GC, what to do and all. Right? So this is about your framework you have. Any questions across here, guys? Any questions? Let me unmute you. So namespace is the name of project we create. For an extent, yes. For an extent, yes. Even your project name you are creating, you can use by default whenever you create any project in your Visual Studio, right? Internally, whenever you create a classes in the same tree level, yes, your project name will be taken as a namespace. But yes, that is not the only namespace which we have. We have many more. That is one namespace which you can use. That's it. Right? I'll show you this. I'll also show you this because by default it will create a namespace of name which is same as your project. No. Fine. Okay, good then. So everyone installed Visual Studio. So whenever you install Visual Studio, right, it will actually go to program files and you can actually find them here. We have Visual Studio installed. Yes, here, right? Microsoft Visual Studio 2012. I have 2012 version license version. I have. So this is the one which is the main editor we have, right? The Visual Studio 2012. Now this is a main editor, a very powerful editor which you have where you can actually create many types of projects. Fine. So now in this, this is a self-explanatory, studio which editor which we have there. You can see Solution Explorer here, right? Where you have different solutions. Whenever you create a project, you can see everything. You have a Team Explorer, you have a class view, and everything, right? And you have all the menus right over the top. So as we go on, right, we'll actually see different options of different menus. Now let's create a new project. Now here it's very important to understand what is a project, right? So we normally write program in classes and run or a simple file and run, right? In our C++, you write a class, right? We write and run. And whenever we actually write some other class, to be more simple, we write some other class in the same folder drive and we run it, and if you want to use cross classes, you can use it. But here in .NET, everything should go with your project. Project contains a set of classes, set of libraries, everything in one set. That is a project. You can't create a simple class outside your project. You have to have a project. Okay? So to create a project, you can go to File, New, and you can see Project here. Now here, this is the area where you can actually see, right, different, types of projects which you can create. Now by default, you can see that you have a Visual C++. Now why do I have a Visual C++ default? Because while starting my .NET, now once you actually start your .NET, right, after installing, it will actually ask you to enter which language you want to set as a default. Let me show you that. I've already said something, but let me show you. I can reset and settings. Reset all. Let me, here you can see, right? Now I'm actually getting this now, but normally when you start a project, right, you will actually get which type of settings you want to keep with default. I've actually kept CSAP development settings as a default, but yes, you can actually go if you are good enough with VB, you can go with VB. If you are good enough with C++, you can do that. Now, this is something which you have. Now, where I can select this and I have made it finish. Now, when you finish it, right, what it will do is it will actually make your Visual Studio, right? It will set everything so that it supports your C++ and development settings. Now it doesn't mean that if you have actually set your C++, it doesn't mean that you can't be able to create some other project types. You can see here, you can have other languages too. You can also see the new one, SQL Server. You also have something called SQL Server type of project where you can actually write or retrieve or edit your different database objects, SPs, functions, views, anything you want you can do this. Right? Now you can see you have many type of projects, console, .NET, MVC projects will be checking out. We'll be actually working, checking out the latest one, MVC4, right? You have many type of you have workflows, you have service applications, WCF, you can see, right? And if you want to go more specific, let's say I want to go only web projects, you can have this. You select web, you can see it will give you only web, right? Same way, reporting, you have SharePoint projects, right? You have Silverlight, different type. You have Windows, right? Now all you have different type of. So under C++, whatever you can do or different type of project you have, right? Right. Same way, you can also have other project types itself. We have seen language. In one language, what are different types, right? You can also have different project types. So setup, you have setup and deployment, right? Where you will be creating, if you have any exe, if you want to create an exe type of for your Windows-based application, then you will create something called installable files, right? Now that is something which is this first window, right? Where now very important thing which you can see is, if you remember, we have actually learned something called frameworks yesterday, right? Different versions of frameworks, right? And as said, in your Visual Studio, right? You can actually use, if you want to develop any version of Visual Studio, and if that version of Visual Studio is compatible, you can develop any version application. Now that is here. Now you can see, so this Visual Studio is compatible from 2.0 till 4.5.1. You can develop application based on any framework you want. Now you can see here, when I have 4.5, you can see I have MVC type of projects, right? Let me select 2.0. You can see when I select 2.0, in 2.0 version we didn't have MVC type of projects. We don't have MVC projects, right? So that's the main thing here. I don't have MVC projects, so that's the reason why I will have to. I may not be able to develop MVC projects if you select your 2.0 version. Same way applies to 3.0. If you go to 3.0, we will give you all type of options to see what you can develop. Now even now you can see what that's the reason why I gave different things, right? In 2006 what features, in 2007 what features now, right? So that's the reason why. Right? Same way, when you go to 3.5, now you can see you have some more added. Right? You can create your cloud-based SDK, right? We have different things. Same if you go to 4.5 and 4 version, then now you can see your MVCs enabled. Right? Now even using this selection, right, you can actually get to know, okay, what are the different new things actually I got, right? So this is how we have. Now by default you have 4.5, right? If you want a new one, now why it is 4.5 is my 2012 version is mainly, you can see it's a 4.5 which actually got released. So that's why it will show you to 4.5. But once you change it, right, it will always follow that. Right? Then let's keep it as 4.5. And here you can see you can have any application. So let's select a console application, one project type, right? Which is my console application type. And let me create a project in some directory. Now let me take my main directory where I create code and all for trainings. Now here let me just say my let me say intro CS intro C# intro projects. Now here you have two different options. Create directory solution. Now when you say create directory solution, whatever type of project you are creating, right, it will create a folder and then inside to that it will create a solution. I'll show you what exactly is the solution right now. And next one you have something called add to source control. Now I don't know whether you have experience in any IT company or not. Source control is something which is used to versioning and maintaining your code across for different developers in the same project, let's say. Right, you have an option to actually add it to source control. If you have your TFS or SVN or anything install your machine, right, you can actually have it add to source control. But as of now, let's leave it. Click on OK. Now when you click on OK, it will actually go back and right now this is your first project. Now you can see your CS intro is your project name, right, where as soon as you created a project, it will create a simple project, and whatever libraries or anything are needed, it will create by default. Now you can see this is a simple class created by our, it is a default class provided by program .NET files, right? Where you can see different things here. CS intro. Now, as Akila was asking, as soon as I created a project, right, you can see this class got created, which is class program, and you can see namespace as CS intro, which is same as my CS intro. This is a simple class. We'll come to this later. What is a class? Now here you can see there are, as I said, whenever you create any project, right, .NET Framework already have got its internal libraries, which are BCL, right, base class libraries. Now, as soon as you create any project, by default, it will get based on the type of project you have selected, right. Your .NET will guide you, or your Visual Studio will actually give you what libraries you may require. Right? That's the reason why it actually added up all this. Now these are nothing but your libraries. Now each and every library are tagged under one single namespace. If you go to PCL, we were talking about namespace, right? All class libraries have got one single namespace called system. Now this is a parent namespace for everything, right? If you don't have system namespace, you will not be able to develop or run your .NET applications, right? That's the reason why you can see your system library will be added to your references. Now you have multiple folders in this project. You have properties, memorable properties. You have something called class. This is my class. And you have some references. Reference is something where your DLLs or libraries will be referenced. Now, in your project, you have reference, system. Same way you can see, even in your class, we have something called system used, which means I want to use different methods in system or different functions in system classes. That's why we have a using in your program. Now, so this is about your libraries being imported. Don't worry about class. We'll come to this class and namespaces and everything, right? Everything. We'll actually get into deeper into what is a class and everything, right? But as of now, this is a main structure of a project when you create it. Now here, if you don't need any library, you can actually remove that. Now let's say I've created a simple class object. I just need a system, that's it. I don't need anything like system data or anything. You can just right click and remove. Because that is something which got created as a default when you create your project. Let's say I don't want system.code, remove it. Not a problem. Right? So this is a very simple presentation. Right? Now this is about your editor and this is about your class and everything. So tomorrow we'll understand what is a class, what is namespace, why are we writing all this using, what is the main use of writing this. If you don't write, what happens, everything will see.